Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Charlie Smith, the Executive Director of Heisig. I also serve in a leadership role with the Global Power System Transformation Consortium, or G-PST, whose mission is to bring together key actors to catalyze a rapid, clean energy transition at unprecedented scale and speed. This is being done by providing a coordinated and holistic approach to the necessary knowledge, education, and support to power system operators across the 5 action pillars. Foundation of the G-PST is a group of 6 system operators from around the globe who are facing higher penetration of wind and solar inverter-based resources sooner than any other operators in the world. The 5 pillars of the consortium are research and peer learning, technical support, workforce development, technology adoption support, and open data and tools. Heisig is the lead on Pillar 1, and more information on the G-PST can be found at globalpst.org. As the lead on Pillar 1, Heisig would like to welcome you to the second webinar of our 2022 monthly Join to G-PST Pillar 1 Heisig webinar series. This series is in addition to the regular Heisig monthly webinar series and focuses on the G-PST research agenda and associated topics being addressed in Pillar 1. Topics are presented by both the founding system operators and other advanced system operators active in Pillar 1, as well as members of industry and academia participating in the activities of the Research Agenda Group and the Research Advisory Committee of Pillar 1. An additional series of webinars on the other 4 pillars of the G-PST is also being provided on a monthly basis through NREL. For those of you who would like to learn more about G-PST and how to engage, please go to globalpst.org and click on the Get Involved tab. Further information on Heisig can be found at heisig.energy. Now I would like to go over a few logistical matters before we get started. First of all, phones will be muted for the duration of the webinar to avoid unnecessary distractions. For the Q&A, we'll use the Slido platform at slido.com. You'll need to open a browser window, go to slido.com, and enter Heisig22 as the event code. The instructions are also at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a thumbs up button next to the questions on Slido to allow you to cast a vote to help prioritize the questions submitted. We plan to save about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end and then wrap it up at the top of the hour. An email with a link will be provided once the video file has been posted. We also plan to provide short responses to unanswered questions after the webinar, so please don't be afraid to ask your questions through Slido. Okay, so today our webinar is on the topic of a modular control center system, or MCCS, a modular and scalable approach to the control architecture for the 50 Hertz system of the future. 50 Hertz is a leading German TSO with a goal of meeting 100% of its energy from renewables by 2032. As we all know, this is a tall order, and the interest around the world in designing and operating power systems to meet such goals has never been higher. Today's webinar will feature Mirko Pracht and Ralf Heisig with 50 Hertz. Mirko is Director of Digitalization and System Operations and Program Lead and Initiator for the MCCS. Mirko and his team are responsible for digitalization strategy and initiatives, data strategy and architecture, project implementation, and for internal compliance and international cooperation topics in system operations at 50 Hertz. Ralf Heisig is the product manager for the MCCS. For the past 10 years, he held various roles and positions, including IT manager and program manager. Prior to that, he worked for 20 years at Siemens Energy and Automation as product manager and project manager in various areas of power system applications, including energy management systems, station automation, and communication technologies. 50 Hertz holds the position of co-chair of the G-PST Pillar 1 Research Advisory Committee, or RAC. So I've had the pleasure of working with them over the past year. They're a very dedicated bunch, and we're very fortunate to have them here with us today. The webinar will demonstrate the path for successfully applying the MCCS design principles to implement the modular and scalable approach to the control architecture from the beginning to end. The challenge of master data management and communications will be outlined, and their role in overcoming future challenges in smart networks and control centers will be described. Okay, just a short reminder once again to use Slido at slido.com with the event code of ESIG22 to ask your questions. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Mirko, I will now turn it over to you.
Yeah, Charlie, thank you very much for the introduction. I learned we can say good afternoon, good evening, and also good tomorrow for the guys who are participating from the eastern side and more or less Australia. Actually, now you should see our starting screen for the modular control center system of the next generation. And I'm quite happy to present to you in combination with Ralf our methodology and our approach for designing the next level of control center systems and applications we have in mind. Basically, just as a short introduction to what is the role of the transmission system operator 50 Hertz. Basically, we are responsible for the securing of the electricity for approximately 18 million people in the northern and the east Germany, more or less the eastern federal states in combination with Hamburg. And our responsibility as a transmission system operator in Germany is the operation, the maintenance, the expansion, and the safety of the extra high voltage grid elements on an onshore perspective and also of an offshore perspective. So it's a combination of responsible for the assets and responsible for system operation in one company and in one structure. When looking at the figures and at the basic facts of 50 Hertz, then and I can move this around, is the basic development, especially of the renewable energy sources, which are used in the share and power consumption. And you can see a tremendous increase to 60% to 2019. And as Charlie already said, our goal is to increase this number to 100% until 2032, which is a quite challenging perspective from the asset perspective, also from a system operation perspective. And this brings into mind and into the situation that we are talking about. How can we change the management of our digital products and the solutions we use to manage this huge amount of renewable energies within the grid. And today, I'm quite happy to present you in combination with Ralf our why, what, how, and who in the storyline of the modular control center system of the next generation. And more or less, I will explain you our situation, why we have taken the decision to going into this direction. And in part also address the facts of what we are addressing with MCCS in the next generation. And then later on, I'm quite happy that Ralf will going into the details of how we go into the how and the who and who is the organization within the MCCS project and the product itself. At the beginning, we have prepared a kind of comic or a picture story in a way to explain the situation we have in MCCS and the motivation behind the project for ourselves. And this explanation will not address the typical questions of what is a SCADA or EMS. We will explain it in a kind of how you want to build a house. And the situation we have in mind today is that typically a house is illustrated, or the energy system in Germany is illustrated like this. it's grown over the last more or less 2 decades. And there is a very good situation in that because we have a very strong personal identification with that, because we are feeling responsible. We have built it over the last 2 or more or less decades. And there is a very good knowledge about the structure of this building and the stages between the in the construction itself. And but basically, when you look at this picture and when you look at the situation, you can already see that there is more or less or some problems or issues. So basically, there is a very much of effort we have to spend in the fact of data redundancy, because for several elements of our today's SCADA environment and EMS solution, we need the data maintenance by several people who are in a day-to-day work or working directly on the maintenance and integrating of updates with our from data within our grid. And this is a more or less manual task, and we need many workarounds behind the structure. And at the end of the day, this is also from the internal perspective, also from the external perspective, a very costly maintenance aspect, because we need many people who are responsible for the data maintenance. We need many vendors who are responsible to make sure that these workarounds and the solutions we have found are working. And more or less, and this is also one point we have to address, it's a kind of vendor lock-in, because we are in a way focused on 2 or 3 of the typical vendors in the structure, and have to work with them, and have also to handle from a TSO perspective all the resource issues or any kind of architectural issues within the products. And in the perspective of the energy transition, and also with the fact that we want change and going to 100%, we know that we need a change for that, and that we need a more modular and clear structured solution to change in a way that we are not, in this case, more vendor, that we more or less vendor independent, and that we can use several vendors, and that we have a more logical and clear structured solution for that. And basically, this is the story behind MCCS. And for that, in the basic definition, we defined the Tbone. In a way, it's a T in the reverse structure, and you can see that we have the basic infrastructure element we define, with the fact that we need a central master data management to avoid any kind of data redundancy, that we need a central data lake to manage all the related data which is coming from our substations and which are also coming from the market, and that we need a structure where we can handle microservices, and that we are able to handle all additional services we want to integrate into this environment based on these microservices. And there are interfaces for the power supplies you can see here. And our basic philosophy is that we integrating a central streaming service, which make it possible to send the data and receive the data from several services, and in a quite typical way of microservice infrastructures, make it possible that we integrate several different modules into this environment. These modules are more functional based, so they include several central capabilities, typical capabilities in a control center. And what you can see in the picture, our philosophy should be that we are able to plug in such modules, such services directly into our environment, and this way make them more modular, more centralized, to enable a subset of capabilities within the system operation. And on the second hand, make it possible to react very fastly in the situation that the energy transition, especially in Germany, is or has the demand that we can react very fast on new changes, on new behaviors, on new situations on the markets, and make it possible to manage the grid, manage the system within 50 Hertz and Elia Group, based on the fact that we are able to provide in a very fast way additional modules to manage this situation. This is the today situation, this is the future situation. To be honest, from a TSO perspective in Germany, it's a definitely change in the culture, in the philosophy, in the behavior, because in the last decades, it was quite common to use the structure on the left side and switching to the right side and taking more responsibility in the question of providing the Tbone and providing basic functionalities, and just make sure that it is possible to integrate additional vendors and make them more and create the base for independency and running projects in parallel is a fact which is only possible when we create at the first base this Tbone and make it available, and then step by step integrate, as you can see in the picture, the modules for ourselves, because we are in part creating the modules you can see in the picture based on our own development, and in the same way make it possible for vendors which are typically on the market to integrate additional modules in this environment, and so have a more or less open architecture for different modules and for different components which can be integrated into this environment. And based on that, we had a subset of stakeholders within the company, also without the company, in the environment of the German TSO landscape and the typical partners within this environment, and step by step planned an approach for building this new next generation of the control center applications, and worked with several set of proof of concepts and also minimal viable products, which are quite directly available within the control center. And also in this way, going from the typical waterfall situation of planning and orchestrating projects to a more agile way of working with iterations, going into several testings, identifying alternatives, and step by step bringing into the mind in the first step, 50 Hertz and Elia Group perspective, the digital transformation and a kind of change process that also at critical infrastructure and on the fact that we are talking about SCADA and typical EMS systems, we need this change, and that this change is possible, and that we're going step by step into this direction and planning a new organized solution, which is a more combination of the responsibility by the TSO itself, by the fact of presenting this Tbone and the structure and the services behind, and the combination of our tailor-made developments which we are doing on ourselves, and the combination of work which is done by suppliers in the direct solution, which is orchestrated into the Tbone, and as you can see in the picture, on a kind of plug and play can be integrated into this environment, and pushing forward this approach of being a modular environment for managing control center services. This is the comic picture behind that, and now we are going more and more step by step going into the details. But before looking at this, just some points we are addressing within our project and the situation. So typically, and when you're looking at on the left side, what states is this expectation, especially from the guys in the control center, that we have a very reliable and very available solution which can support in a 24/7 situation for the control center colleagues and make it sure that we fulfill all the high security requirements within this environment. On the different side, we see the situation that we have multiple data maintenance in our systems and need a single point of truth, that we have different changes which are needed in the environment, and we are facing already the situation that the entire system should be changed, and we need a more flexible and modular solution we have in mind and which we need, and that quite often in the typical situations we have in the methodology of projects, that in the typical waterfall situation with using a Lastenheft or a user specification and a system specification, the results are quite often seen in the perspective of the control center very lately, and we need a more step-by-step and continuous approach, which is quite often seen in agile projects where control center colleagues on our side and the users are giving feedback directly to us, and this is influencing us in the way we are working within our environment. Just to give some examples, and also from the perspective of the vendor login, changing into the fact that it is not our motivation to going into the direction of presenting a solution which is quite completely in a kind of open source. We are enable the market from our perspective to make sure that different and multiple vendors can integrate additional modules into our environment. And these modules can also be in a kind of commercial solution, which can be sold to additional TSOs, ISOs, or something else like that, in a way of to be a more or less have an open architecture, which makes it possible to integrate several of such solutions, and not to have the situation that one vendor is providing the complete stack, the complete architecture, just to make sure that it is more flexible and adaptable for a different set of vendors. Based on that, and this was the feedback we had internally within the company, and we have several projects in the past where we learned from that this is not the right direction. This is combining from both sides, from the more operational perspective that we need a different approach to addressing the challenges, and also from a strategic perspective that we have the fact that we want to change from a strategy that we have to handle until 2032 the change in our use of renewable energy from 60 to 100%, which definitely needs or giving us the demand to change our philosophy, to be more flexible, to be more adaptable, and to have also the possibility in our environment, not only from a methodology perspective, also from the business perspective, from the technical perspective we are working on, to be adaptable in this direction, and are finding also a way of being more faster to include several modules and several elements into our environment. And so we had an basically vision and philosophy behind that from a business perspective and also from a technical perspective, how we can plan and work with the strategy to going from 60 to 100% by 2032. And you can see within the structure that this is a clear statement and a clear strategy from the complete group of ELIA, which is a combination of the ELIA TSO in Belgium and the 50 Hertz on the German side. And this is also the base and the foundation we are working on within MCCS and building the structure of the modular control center system environment. And based on this fact and based on this visualization, I want to give the opportunity to introduce you Ralf, who is the leading responsible product manager for the MCCS ecosystem. And he will start with the explanation of how we orchestrate this strategic and philosophy methodologies into the direct implementation of the modular control center system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirko, and welcome, everyone. Yes, as you see on the left side, I would like to start with a little bit again, the ambition and how we develop that product, MCCS. And on the left side, you see what is really in the main focus. You see the mentioned Tbone integration layer, and you see on a really high level, I agree to that, some modules, as we call it, SCADA modules and LFC and other modules, which are common in system operation. And you see already some change to the existing world. You see there is one main graphic user interface. So already here on that architecture picture, you see the change. Not each module will bring its own user interface. Now it's all centralized, organized. And all with the orange box outside is called our modular control center system, which will be implemented, or it's nearly has started, and we have the function in 50 Hertz ecosystem. We will develop further, and we have further ambition to that. And Mirko, if you continue to the right hand, of course, we will not only apply applications and develop applications which are already there. You see on top other applications we even don't know will come on the same approach, the same modular approach. And you see on the right hand other ambition. What does it mean? Yeah, if we build such a system, if we build such a modular and system, it can be used by others. It can be used by our ELIA, Belgium TSO, it can be used by other TSOs, 1, 2, 3. And as you can imagine, as more as would join our journey, as better the system could be developed. And you see here with a copy and paste picture, it could be exactly the same. It could be also somehow tailored based on specific TSO demand, so that also the development and usage of our MCCS is it's open and up to each individual TSO. But you see here, we really already the ambition, it's not that we build something, play supplier role and want to build it for us only, which would mean high effort. Now it should be really available and usable also by others. And you will see that also in the next slides later on when we always talk about the so-called product. Yeah? A product, it's not a solution of a project for one company. We really have the ambition to go into the product mode used by others. And you see also in the legend that the orange box itself describes the full system. Yeah, it's everything in. And the integration platform is a core, and this is a property and made by us, orchestrated by us, so as a TSO. But for the modules, each of the modules we have defined, we will undergo a make or buy decision, and we will take a strategic decision whether that function will be purchased on a market or that function will be self-made and developed in-house. Yeah, thank you. And next slide, please. Because the ambition, our baseline ambition, how to come to such a solution will be visible on the next slide. Exactly, the approach and setup. If we really want to build something different and something new, we can't follow the standard way how to make projects. And therefore, we have some key aspect identified and also apply these rules that we say we need to accept disruptive target scenarios. It will look different afterwards. It's clear, and you can imagine it's not easy for everyone to accept it, because normally we have, not normally, but we have the high ambition to be reliable all the time, to be predictable in our system behavior. And of course, if you build something new and disruptive, there might be a risk that it does not fulfill the requirements, but for that, the other lines will apply. So we have an iterative process with fast deliveries. We will immediately see what we have built, and we can give feedback on that, so that there is a closed loop and not, as you know, from the waterfall approach, wait 2, 3, 4 years to get something big and then test everything in a short term and hope that you have covered everything in a test. No, the customers, our operators are already involved doing the development, and as soon as a function is available, they can directly test, see, and give feedback. That leads to the continuous improvement. We will not stop when we have reached a milestone, when we have something finished. With our change in the energy market, the demand for change is even to us and our system much higher than before. We are not waiting 2 years for the next big upgrade. Now it's a continuous request, and our system will allow us to integrate those changes also fast. So we are very adaptive to the complex and changing environment, as I say. What we have learned and what is really key, interdisciplinary across all teams in our organization and in our project. It's not something which a supplier will deliver. It's nothing IT only will deliver. It's really a combination of in-house disciplines, business and IT, and external parties. We really, really work together here. And then we did the lessons learned analysis, what happened in our last project. And I think every one of you knows what come. Of course, because of the waterfall, we had too many requirements for one vendor. So they've got a list of thousands of requirements mapped, and yeah, they even don't have time to read each individual requirement one by one. It's really a high effort. And then you now do a calculation, do an offer on a tender. It's quite hard and not leading to a good solution. So the mismatch in requirement understanding, because of the list, of the long list and the topic, it overwhelmed the suppliers. Of course, mismatch means you get something, but this is not exactly what you want. And then you have 4 years for a big system implemented, and then you get something which needs, again, a change. The flexible framework or modules necessary. So every change should be available wherever it's needed in a system. Is it one module? Is it another module? Is it on a backbone? You need to have the flexibility to adapt and change wherever you want without big dependencies. And as I say, dependency also to have one vendor for the core system means you have a vendor dependency where you have always to consider that it costs extra as normal, where it has time dependencies. The vendor need to have the resources and the time to give you the product when you need it. And of course, sometimes you also feel and face the situation that the vendor says, this is against our strategy as a vendor, whatever you want, but that protocol, that solution will not be implemented by us. And then you have such a block of idea, and our ecosystem needs to have that freedom to adapt to what we as a TSO need. Yeah, with that, we come to the approach to the detail view in the next slide, which is...
And maybe one remark, when we are talking about sharing and the philosophy, then we are sharing about the fact and going back into the structure of this. When we are talking about the ambition, we are sharing our aspects, our methodology, our philosophies, and also the solutions we have in mind. So feel at rest in the way of that we are talking about here, that we are motivated to bring this into the community based on the solutions we have, based on the methodology we have, based on the lessons learned we have. And sorry, Ralf, going to the next slide.
Yes, very good, Mirko, because it really highlights that we are not only talking about a product as such, yeah, we are talking about the product, of course, but also how could we set up, or how could you set up a project organization to implement those solutions into your system? And of course, how an organization needs to change and adapt to the new demand and the new times. So, for example, a TSO, which turns from being only a network operator to being an orchestrator and software developer. Yeah, the TSO gets a new role, a new profile in its people, in its mindset. Yeah, and this is something I will explain exactly also in some later slides. Here, very quick, but you see on the right hand, the development and implementation phase. I think this is key here to see that our legacy systems and parts will be transferred service by service to the new integration platform and build the integration platform bigger and bigger. So it's a grow effect. And that shows we are not talking about big bangs, not talking about hard cuts. Module by module, service by service, we will implement into new platform, new system. And some people asked me then already about, yeah, if you develop something, do you really stress the system operators after each cycle with new developments? Yeah, they need to be tested, they need to be accepted by the operators. And therefore, we have that three-level approach. Of course, software developer work in a so-called sprint cycle, which is in our case a 3-week. So the software is available each third week. We do continuous deployment where we compile the things together and make it available. But in front of our customers and our control center operators, they will get only updates and releases on a more relaxed cycle, yeah, to settle what's new, to learn what's new. And the good thing is that line 3 means it's in the hand of the operators to take a decision. When is the maturity good enough to be used? And this is not we as a provider say, yeah, it's here and you get it. No, it can be 1 month, it can be half a year between line 1 and line 3. It's really a continuous alignment from software developer to the end user. And yeah, next slide, please.
And the philosophy you are seeing in this slide is not only limited to our own implementation, it's also in the kind and in the same way for any kind of vendors we can integrate. And we have the first success stories on that, that it is possible also to integrate in this philosophy vendors to work in this combined approach for the implementation.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Talking about modules, as I mentioned before, a module can be self-developed, but the module can also be supplied by vendors, and then it's exactly the same approach as you say, Mirko. Thank you for that extension. This is a short-term roadmap. Yeah, maybe you ask what's coming next? What are they doing in the next 12 months? The next slide later is then the long-term roadmap, but here you really see how we think and how we create a milestone. We call it the so-called checkpoint 22. Last year we had the checkpoint 21 in September, which was a key milestone where we had the first real results. I will come to that. And we have now the new checkpoint milestone in September 22. And we have taken a decision what will be in and how do we structure the work in the next 12 months? Because as I mentioned, it's first orchestration of many activities, not only the real product development. And we have 3 columns here. Yeah, you see we have, of course, some enablers in our project. We need procedures. We need a good infrastructure, for example, a development stage, a test and integration stage, which we are normally not have as a TSO. Our organizational setup needs to be adapted. You see that also with me in my role as a product lifecycle manager, which was really a change also in our TSO mindset that a product manager comes into the company. You see we have project topics which contribute and prepare for further product developments. We do feasibility checks. We will do a market sounding to get an interaction with suppliers. What kind of modules could be supplied by suppliers and how would the cooperation would look like. And of course, the full roadmap plan is that. And on the right hand, you see finally the product topics, the real product development, where we, of course, deliver the product backbone and some modules. And everything in that case is then described in epics and stories, as you know, in an agile approach. Then we fill the backlog and the sprint log. So very hands-on in the development with our development factory inside. And also the infrastructure requirements are clarified and delivered to make it available as a sustainable solution and not only a tryout a proof of concept or an MVP, as many people think. Yeah, and of course, part of that is always the make or buy decision. So what product is strategically taken from a market and what will be developed on our own hand. Yeah, next slide gives us the long-term roadmap and some insights. How do we work? On the right hand, you see the development steps. Yeah, first, and this is already a mind change, we cut our legacy systems into business functions. It's the brain stuff where we say, okay, for example, the SCADA system is not only SCADA as one solution. SCADA, it's a monolithic application in most cases. But when you take it from the capabilities, what SCADA is doing? We can cut it into some boxes, modules. And the most easiest explanation on that high level is, of course, SCADA means you have monitoring, you have control, you have data acquisition, and yeah, alarming and others, you know. SCADA means supervisory control and data acquisition, and we just cut it into what it is. And we also do it with other legacy systems. Our LFC is also cut into, yeah, getting data, do the calculation and provide an output. And we have some process interfaces, yeah, the communication adapters, the gateways and everything. Is that exactly what we need in the future, or can we also cut it into specific functions? And this is what we do. Yeah, we cut our legacy systems into capabilities, modules, functions, and then we take for each module a make or buy decision. And after that, we execute the decision and say, okay, let's purchase it from a market or let's develop that. And then you see it's like a box on a row. One by one service can be integrated to our integration platform, and the system grows monthly, yearly to the full ecosystem as it was planned and called modular control center system. So we have a migration flow when sometimes it can run in parallel. For example, for this year, we run the so-called monitoring function from SCADA, and everything we built this year is totally in parallel to the existing SCADA. We will not touch the existing SCADA, we not disturb and we not violate any things in that, but we build up and grow a new monitoring functionality based on our integration platform, and our system operator in September can use it in parallel to the existing system. But, and you see sometimes two arrows go to the same box, we have also identified by cutting things into capabilities, we have overlappings. Some monolithic modules have data management. Some monolithic modules have system monitoring or alarming. And what we do now is we not replace every monolithic system individually. Now we combine things. Yeah, 5 previous legacy system data management are combined in our integration platform. It's only one source of the truth, one data management centralized. Alarming function, it's not one alarming function for SCADA anymore. The alarm function can combine SCADA data, asset monitoring, and system monitoring, because this is really key that the system operator can get all data combined in one, an example, alarming, and then based on the filters and some logic, you get only the information you need as a system operator, not to be overwhelmed by many warnings about the system load by being 60% CPU power or something. That would be boring and not helpful. But really combining the data in one, we call it shared module, and provide it to the end user on the best way. This is our approach, coming from monolithic to modular approach. And you see with the roadmap, we have a tough ambition. Yeah, end of 25, we really want to replace the existing core functions in our system operation with real-time operation. Yeah, the next slide will show a little bit our so-called development factory. How in the hell can you work in that mode if something is so new? And of course, we have learned to organize ourselves, not in that, as you said, Mirko, approach with requirement specification and system specification and everything full-fledged in the beginning and then wait and get and test. Now we have on the left hand that circle or cycle where it starts with representing the product lifecycle manager, representing the business, saying, I have a new requirement as a product manager. I would like to have, for some reason, a new function. And it could be a small change in a system. Yeah, the background color of the alarm list is black and needs to be yellow or red. Okay, then it will be a fast change. No problem, 3 weeks development time and it will be changed. Or it's really something big. It's really something on a modular level. And then the request is checked in our, we call it workstream structure, in our workstream business, where it's checked against what kind of capabilities do we need to add? How is that interlinked to our business processes? What are the business scenarios to describe that system without legacy system using? Yeah, and then create a use case, what really is needed after alignment in business. And also usability and user experience will be considered here. We have also user experience UX expert in that workstream. Then it goes to the architecture workstream, where we really check that function which is requested. Does it fit to the existing modules or do we need to extend? How is the long-term architecture outlook? And yeah, adaptation will take place. Then the make or buy decision, as you can imagine, and development or purchases from the market, getting the infrastructure in place, and finally bring it to operation. And if it replaces a system, we do the fade out of the old application. On the right hand, you see also a work stream we call productization. That productization is independent of the solution development, taking care about everything we build shall be available also for others. Therefore, we request some flexibility to the system, some configuration capabilities. Yeah, and of course, as you see, legal compliance and other stuff. Yeah, with that, I would like to go to the next, because you may ask, where do we stand and what have we reached so far? And with that on the left side, I say, of course, we system operation TSO 50 Hertz in Germany, we need a new control center software. Therefore, that is our primary goal. It's really, we need a new system and therefore we create a new ecosystem. And then, of course, we have a secondary goal that also our ELIA group, 50 Hertz is part of the ELIA group in Belgium. We also need to provide a solution there. And in addition, as I mentioned, I think twice, it also shall be available for the society of other TSOs and interested people. And Checkpoint 21 last year, we have evaluated our milestone after 1 year project time. And we say, yes, we have delivered on 3 elements. We have delivered on product level. We really made the Tbone, the backbone, how to say it, it's live. It's not a slideware. It's not a proof of concept. It's really in operation. Yeah, it developed by ourselves, orchestrated with the elements and technologies we are using. We have already implemented some platforms, modules. For example, we have a centralized user interface. At that level, quite simple, but we have implemented. Yeah, we have implemented the first generic alarm list to show how a centralized alarm list would look like. And also the master data management first version was shown, presented in September 21. And as I mentioned, not fully fledged as in waterfall, but in its first increments. Yeah, and we also showed that we are open for third-party integration. Therefore, in Checkpoint 21, we already implemented the first third-party supplier, also working on an additional user interface to prove that our architecture is ready to integrate other suppliers as we described on papers. And it worked. Yeah, the architecture setup is quite clear and easy so that it's shown and proved it can be used. And then secondly, we say, yeah, we have learned a lot in that year. We have also adapted our project setup to that development factory, as I described, and also organization. So the line organization has seen some changes in the organization to make us available to operate such a system, which was not the way before. With that, I'm coming to the next step, and this is already my last slide. Then we continue with that, what I mentioned on product level. We will continue to build MCCS as a product with many more modules. We want to establish and develop a cooperation with other market players. So suppliers, for example, yeah, where we do really a market sounding and we ask for open cooperation with us, and really suppliers get in touch with us, and we will see what kind of modules can be developed by others and will increase our module portfolio. And of course, we are also interested in arrangement and cooperations with other partners and TSOs. We are already in that step now, and maybe there will be some press news soon, so that we are really getting some official agreements in place with other TSOs. We switch from a classic project to a product mode, which means really that we want to have something developed which can be used by others and not only accepted as an in-house solution. And yeah, organization needs to grow further into the new mindset, new behavior, using new methodologies. With that, I'm coming to the last, and this is really just the thank you slide. Yeah, architecture picture, I think it's for the question then, Mirko, if there are some questions.
Yeah.
But I really would like to invite everyone, join our vision, get in touch with us. Later, if you get the presentation via PDF, you can contact us also here. And thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Mirko and Ralf.
Thank you very much, and giving back to you, Charlie.
Yes, I've been watching the questions coming through during the course of your presentation, and some of the questions you've touched on or answered to some extent, but there's a kind of an undercurrent of flavor in the early questions that carried through, and I think you answered it here and there, but really the question is, how far do you see 50 Hertz going in the development direction? Are you going to become a developer and sell this, I think, is the undercurrent, or are you doing open open system
Open source
software
approach, yes.
you're looking for
Mirko,
collaborators on? What's the kind of motivation and business model, I guess, is the tone of a lot of the questions.
Maybe I start and then you can follow up, Ralf. It's when talking, this is a quite typical question we have in mind, and you, believe me, this is also a typical question we had in our company itself. How fast can you be with this approach? And basically, just remember the picture of Ralf as he shown the decomposition of several modules within MCCS. What we learned, and what we learned very fast, is that in a kind of, we can also demystifying SCADA. We can demystifying SCADA and EMS solutions in the fact that by describing several modules and starting very early in the questions of how can we reuse benefits like alarming, event management, basic functionalities for data acquisition, data providing for several modules and services, which are more general and which can be used for several modules. The typical amount for implementing capabilities for NEC calculation, load frequency control, the typical SCADA solutions for controlling or switching can be reduced in amount of the effort which is used for implementing such functionalities. This is the first point. And we identified this point not only from the fact and the perspective of what is need from ourselves for describing, for example, business requirements or requirements itself. It's also identified for the fact that it is much more easier for providers or vendors who should provide solutions for that they can fulfill these requirements, because we are more in the responsible role for slicing, cutting down, and bringing it to a right portion of elements, and having the right setup of clusters of requirements. We building in a group, and also describe in a way of the usage of typical shared functionalities, as I said, and already Ralf said, for alarming or event management and something else. And so when you are using this approach, it's quite more easily to going into the details and identifying that it is, yes, it's an effort to going into this direction, but at the end of the day, it's not rocket science to implement such solutions. And in this way, as I said, it's a kind of demystifying the situation and make it more plannable also for providers. What are the elements they should provide and what should they implement? And in a kind of, it's much more easier than presenting a 1,000 or 2,000 pages user specification to a render, which is from both perspectives, from a customer perspective and also from a render perspective, is more risky in a way.
Okay.
Thank you, Mirko. Can I add something maybe
Yes,
because
please do. Go ahead.
to the question, I would say we have identified that we think in modules and we have the integration platform. And what is key for us is that the integration platform as such needs to be in our hands. So this is by definition not a make or buy decision anymore. Yeah, the integration platform and the definition of interfaces is an orchestration from us, from ourselves. For the modules, there is a most likely answer to say the shared modules, which are very specific to the integration platform, alarming, most likely in our hands self-developed. For each other module, it is a make or buy decision, but it's not by definition, it needs to come from a classic big supplier as usual, as a TSO word. So that is something we break off or break out, I don't know to say in English. Yeah, we change to say, yeah, it could be a smaller provider. It could be even a new market player because we do not expect that the supplier it's bringing it to the IT security infrastructure zone, everything, because we orchestrate it together and make sure that it fulfills our requirements from the reliability, availability, and all the high TSO expectation. And when it comes to the business question, Charlie, your second part, we are not aiming on commercial goals. Yeah, we are not fully clear about how to. Is it a shared approach, one-to-one, peer-to-peer, or is it an open source approach? It takes some months to tackle that because of the legacy and the regulation. And yeah, there are so many things to be considered to go open source. Therefore, we can't say that here is already taken decision and final, but it's not a commercial goal acting on a market as a supplier to make money with it. We want to share. And of course, in best case, we want to get something from others. Yeah, so we build module 1, 2, 3, and you build module 5, 6, 7, and both can use it. That would be our dream. However, it's in a contractual way, it's implemented later. Does that answer the question?
I think there's a related question from the Slido here. It's how do you communicate to the vendors the architectural requirements for the common interfaces, dependencies, protocols, authentications, verifications, security?
Exactly. To make that a success, we are starting some proof of concepts. And as I mentioned already last year, we did that with one supplier successful. So we are in contact with some vendors already to prove that our description, our architecture description, our interface description is sufficient for them. And to make double proof, we really implement them as a proof of concept, not saying it will be that by definition, because we tested with you, it will be final and we use you, but we already have suppliers which are in touch with us and where we do the implementation on an integration stage to really see that the interface description describes everything a supplier will understand.
And maybe in this point, some extension from my side, we are very clear that this is in a way also for any kind of vendor or supplier in this situation is a kind of change. We completely know this, and we included in our approach the situation that is also a kind of need to change in the behavior or in the thinking of vendors, and we plan in our approach the space that this change is necessary, and this is completely understood from our perspective on our side. And basically based on that, it's more easily and quite easily possible to talk with vendors about the possibility to integrate in such an approach, and more or less providing modules and services within this environment, which is very helpful,
Okay,
which is also from a vendor perspective is really appreciated.
Okay, I realize we're just about at the top of the hour here, but I want to ask one last question from the list here that's, I think it's, in some ways it's related to what we just discussed, in some ways it could be a little different, but it's asking about the single largest factor or barrier to getting to the 100% renewable goal. Where do you see this in the hierarchy of the challenges that you're addressing?
Very good question. In the perspective I see today, I would say from a digitalization aspect, we are facing very strongly the fact that you need a very good speed in clearly identifying business capabilities, have a clear understanding and mind behind them, find a good solution how you can implement it, and bring them into the commissioning so that they can be used in the control center to manage new situations in the energy market and in the managing of the system grid. And in a way of switching from the time to market philosophy to a time to commissioning philosophy, we in quite often many meetings we are talking about how can we reduce the time to commissioning for new modules and solutions to make it effectable and usable within the control center directly, which will be very helpful to manage the actual situations we have in the energy transition, because we are thinking that the way of going from 60 to 100% is transition. And when we are talking about a transition, then we need kind of flexibility from both perspectives. From the perspective of a system operator who has the challenge to holding the system stable and make sure that it is a sustainable grid situation. And from the perspective of the digitalization, where we have to find and adapt new solutions which can help the system operators in the way they are working. And so from both sides, we need a way where we can go into this transition step and working from both sides on this. And I think we need a very close connection. That's the first point. And the second point, providing in a very fast solution and a very good solution, clear digital products which can help the system operation and the system operators in their day-to-day work to make sure that they are able to manage this new challenge of integrating more and more renewable energy.
Okay, I think a very, very important question for you and for everybody else, obviously. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. We're going to need to wrap it up. Thank you for this very informative, thought-provoking discussion. I think that it's both the presentation and the discussion have caused us all to maybe think a little bit differently or look at things in a little different light. I know it's caused me to think about some new things today, and looks at the questions, I think it did for everyone else as well. As I mentioned earlier, an email will go out once the video file has been posted, and we'll get the responses to the unanswered questions posted as quickly as possible. So Mirko and Ralf, you've got a little bit of homework to do. We appreciate everyone's engagement, and if you want to stay engaged, I'd invite you to participate in the March webinars and in the spring technical workshop, which will be held during the week of March 21 in Tucson, Arizona. Further information on the workshop and on all of the webinars can be found on our website at isig.energy under events, and you're all invited to attend. Information on all the G-PST webinars can also be found at globalpst.org. Mirko and Ralf, I want to thank you once again for this very timely webinar and thank all of you for your interest. We look forward to seeing you again in the near future. In the meantime, everyone, take care, stay safe, and thanks again for your participation. Hope to see you in Tucson. Bye now.